Yo, have you heard of LinkedIn Learning? If you haven't, LinkedIn Learning is an American massive open online course provider. It provides video courses taught by industry experts in a variety of subjects. Now, why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because Living Corporate is in partnership with LinkedIn Learning to provide diversity, equity, and inclusion courses. Listen, if you're trying to be a better ally, you want to understand better diversity, equity, inclusion strategies, or you just want to learn how to be a better leader, you got to check out the courses on LinkedIn Learning. So check it out. You can do it one of two ways. You can click the link in the show notes, or you go to LinkedIn Learning and you search Living Corporate. Again, link in the show notes, or go to LinkedIn Learning and search Living Corporate. I'll see you over there.
Welcome everybody to another episode of The Access Point. This is season number 3, 1, 2, 3. And we have 2 illustrious guests that we're going to have a show about doing effective interviewing. But first, let's talk about the Living Corporate platform. Living Corporate is a digital media network consultancy focused on workplace equity and inclusion. Living Corporate centers and amplifies Black and Brown voices just as yourself in the workplace through digital media production and business-to-business consulting. The network offers a variety of programming, and tonight we're excited that you joined us for our latest installment of The Access Point. What is The Access Point? The Access Point is a weekly webinar focused on preparing Black and Brown college students and early career professionals for the workforce by having real nuanced talks that they really need. And so just for a disclaimer, the thoughts and views expressed in tonight's discussion do not necessarily represent the views of each person's respective organization that the guest is affiliated with. And with that being said, we have our 2 panelists here. Nadine, please introduce yourself.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me here today. Really excited to join this conversation. My name is Nadine Mullings. My pronouns are she, her. I am a woman of faith, sister, daughter, friend, disruptor, and perpetual philosopher. I am a people connector by trade and currently in law school. By the time I sit for the bar, my hope and prayer is that I will be an employment advocate and strategic advisor, helping to reimagine workplace structures just so about anyone can feel like they belong when they're at work. I'm excited about this week's episode because as a truth seeker, one of my favorite things about being a recruiter is being able to pull back the veil of the hiring process. So thanks again for having me.
Thanks for coming on. And Zahra, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Nadine, best of luck with that bar exam. Hi, everyone. My name is Zahra Barikbin. My pronouns are she and her. Thank you so much for having me. I love everything networking, and I wish my younger self was able to watch this. And why I say that is I am first generation college student, first generation American, first generation everything. So really it was watching things like this and having mentors and people in my court that helped me get to where I am today. My background started actually as a tax accountant at a Big 4 accounting firm. My career was a little windy, switched into a recruiting role. I think anyone that meets me knows I'm a big people person, huge DE&I advocate. And I think that's where I love to live my purpose and do what I do. I currently work as a recruiter for a large tech company. And again, just want to reiterate my views here today are my own, and really just so excited to be here and just share, do's and don'ts and things that we've learned over the years. So hope you get something really valuable out of the session today.
Excellent. And so, just as usual, if the audience wants to ask questions, please feel free to ask questions. Please feel free to interact, comment, share, subscribe. We're a family here, so we want to have these discussions with you. And with that being said, Nadine, let's go with the first question, right? So we're talking about interviewing effectively, right? So trying to get the job, trying to look the part. I got a nice suit on. I got my head shaven, haircut, fresh beard, fresh lineup. But, my outer appearance is okay. It's presentable. It's respectable for the corporate workforce. But in your mind is what really needs to happen, right? You need to get your mind prepared, right, for the discussions of talking to somebody one-on-one with a panel or whatnot, right? So my first question is, where do you think most job seekers struggle in the interview process and why?
Yes, this is a really great question. I think probably from the beginning, right? Understanding what it is that you hope to get out of that conversation, as well as how do you present yourself, knowing where your values align, knowing where your ideals align with that company is one of the best ways to kind of set yourself up for success throughout the rest of the process. So do your homework on yourself first. A lot of times I even talk to people about like mindfulness, meditation, like all those things, kind of if you have any challenges internally that you're struggling with having to do with work, you can get hurt at work and that will manifest itself even in an interview. I've seen people, you can see the pain on their face as they're describing maybe a challenge that they went through or even the uncertainty, right? That will come through too. And then my question is, are you sure this is where you want to be? So first, know yourself, right? Do your homework, take that time. Again, mindfulness, meditation, all of those things make a difference. It sounds a little cheesy, but it does. And then once you've really kind of plugged into what you're hoping to, what your purpose is and where your values align, then you can do your research. You'll find that a lot of companies nowadays, they have their core values, and they have their mission statement, even if they're a for-profit organization, listed on their website. Read that, look at that, then go on a site like Glassdoor, and see, are people saying the same thing? Does it mirror what you're seeing on the website, versus what you're seeing on Glassdoor? There are other really great sites like Team Blind. It's and another one is Dipper, so from a DEI through a DEI lens, looking at people from underestimated communities is what I like to say. And just making sure that you're doing your homework. Yeah.
Okay. So for the person, I have a background in chemical engineering, right? So I'm not used to the lingo, the jargon, right? I can say chemical engineering jargon, and you're like, what is that? So D&I, what is D&I?
Thank you for calling that out because I did want to say it. So DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay.
And so diversity is of the people who are here, how many people are different? We want to see a number of different people, whether it's seen or unseen, actually. So people may have differences that we don't see, right? And then equity is based on their lived experience. Sometimes they're at a disadvantage. So how do we make that right? How do we fill the gap between those who have kind of a head start, right? And then inclusion is now that we have different people, we fill the gap between the differences. How do we make sure that everyone feels like they, should be here and they're included in part of these conversations? And then some even talk about belonging, right? So now that we're including everyone, how does everyone feel comfortable enough to connect in a way that's meaningful and make a meaningful contribution and know that they belong there in making that contribution? So thank you for that question.
Oh, no problem. And Zahra, I have a question for you, right? So Nadine gave an example, just more of a general sense, but how can we do it for college students and early career professionals, right? So how can we get them ready? So let's say, for example, I am a first year college student. I, don't know who to network with, who to talk to. I need to really understand the interviewing process, right? What are some things or some key takeaways that somebody who's doing this for the very first time, how can they get themselves ready for the interview?
Yeah, so career services is huge. And honestly, I say career services is probably, again, where the help that they provided me at my university, and I'm going to shout out Temple University here, if it wasn't for career services, I really would be so lost because I was the student that started and had no idea business professional and business casual and the difference between those right? So that gap in terms of getting yourself ready, using the right words, being able to sell yourself, being able to talk about some of those tougher questions that, tell me about your weaknesses, tell me about a difficult person, right? As someone that may not be in an environment or has interviewed before, I think career services is that first step to really get help in terms of mock interviews, the resources that your colleges and universities have in terms of they have employers coming to your campus to meet you, right? And then third, the biggest thing is having your board of directors. So having different mentors, and I live by this even now, 8 years into my career, is I have people within my organization and outside of my organization that are going to tell me exactly how it is and aren't going to be scared to hurt my feelings. Because the biggest thing with feedback is I may not know I'm intentionally doing something. It could just be, I just didn't know, right? So the first ever event I ever attended, I wore business casual thinking I was in business professional because I didn't know the difference, right? So it just takes someone to pull me aside and be like, hey, Zahra, these are the difference between business casual and business professional. And I never made that mistake again.
So you talked about your board of directors, right? So I know what a board of director is, right? But I don't want to give the answer away. So in your opinion, what are your board of directors?
Yeah, so I like to use that fancy term as they're my mentors. They are people that I can go to, as I know, like I'll call my mom up and she may not be able to help me in terms of, telling me, Zahra, this is exactly how you should phrase what you're trying to ask your boss or your coworker, et cetera. But she's going to tell me and support me emotionally, which I'm going to need, versus somebody else within the organization, is going to say, Zahra, these are the exact terminology you should use, and think about rephrasing the statement that you're saying. So you're not like telling someone how it is, but more so like, politically correct asking and telling at the same time. Right. So I would say it's just a fancy word for mentors. And you can start as a college student, start with your professors. I can't tell you as a recruiter and working on campuses, the amount of professors that will bring over students and make that like leeway of being like, hey, I have this great student, right? So a recruiter is able to meet you halfway. So take advantage, I would say, of like office hours that your professors have. And that's a really great way to leverage your resources, but also practice networking, right? And I'll share like a quick story. I don't want to go over time, but my dad owned super small businesses. Like I was like a 5-year-old working a cash register. That's how I knew I always loved business, right? But, I'm the middle child of 7, and my dad would talk to everyone. Like we would roll our eyes and be like, oh, there goes my dad talking again to some random person, right? And I didn't know the term for that was called networking, because you really don't know who you're going to meet. And fast forward many, many years, I guess I've become my dad, because that's me. Like I will spark a conversation with someone at like a coffee line, anywhere, because honestly, those are the best conversations, because you truly never know who you're going to meet. And I think it's a good way to just learn how to introduce yourself and have that emotional intelligence to just be able to spark a conversation and lead a conversation with whoever.
Okay. Nice. And as a person, go ahead, Nadine.
I'm just going to add really quickly to that, because Zahra, that is such a great story. I love it. And my story is probably more along the lines of feeling like it's uncomfortable. I think most people, when you talk to them about networking, I love how you made that parallel. It's as simple as just having a conversation on a coffee line. But, there are other ways too to kind of like network. So if you're, introverted, for example, and it's uncomfortable for you to just walk up to someone, right? Yeah, me too. You would never know, but I am. And, so sometimes it's easier for me to like send an email. So you'll find a lot of times I'm like sending messages on LinkedIn. I was also going to suggest, even when you talk about, networking is not necessarily just those face-to-face conversations, but it will open the door to some of those face-to-face conversations. And as an introvert, it gives you also time to edit your thoughts and put them out there. The other thing I was going to say too, in terms of, and, like I said, Zahra, you had such great points, just to add, like, LinkedIn Learning is also a really great resource when you're looking for ways to communicate or lead with influence. They have hundreds and thousands of, resources that you can go through to use. And you can get it free through the New York Public Library if you're in New York, or whatever public library you have. They'll typically call it lynda.com. But check it out. Go for New York. Again, it's a New York Public Library, but depending on where you are regionally, they might have free access to that as well. Just use your resources. You might not feel comfortable doing it at work. Sometimes at work, it can be a little tenuous, or even in school. Sometimes if your professors or career services doesn't feel accessible, just know that there are a lot more, online resources to use as well.
All right. So I have a question for both of you, and it just popped up in my head, right? So just fresh out of college, trying to get into the workforce, but I don't have experience, but I'm interviewing. What can a person do to show experience, but they don't have the work experience that's necessary? And I'll start with Zahra first.
Yeah, so that is transferable skills, right? So a company is going to hire you entry level right from college, not just because you've done the job, right? It's, are you teachable? So I think as I tie this to college students, it's organizations within your college or university, community service within your community, and places of faith if you're active in that. So there's so many different places that you can get those transferable skills, and then the art of being able to sell that to relate it back to what you're doing. So I'll give you an example. I waited tables all through high school. That's how I put myself through college. And when you think about that, right, that transferable skills is communication. So I may seem very extroverted. I'm actually not. So the first networking session I ever went to, I left the business school and I'm like, what did I get myself into? I didn't wear the right thing. I didn't know how to introduce myself. I was so nervous. But practice makes perfect in terms of networking and pushing yourself to be uncomfortable and feeling okay with it as time goes on. So that transferable skills from me waitressing is communication skills, being able to manage different customers, being able to juggle many different tasks, right? So I'm kind of the person in the middle between someone's angry they didn't get their food, and it's not really my fault because I put it in and it's the kitchen, but I'm not pointing fingers. It's more of how can I mediate between the customer leaving here happy, right, and getting the service that they came in for. So, you tie that to professional services where I started my career, right? You're going to have some unhappy clients that you want to make sure, are going to be returning clients to your company, right? We're juggling many different things throughout the day. I'm not just working on one task and that's the only thing I'm working on. And then communicating with my teams, communicating with clients, that is really key. So making sure that really taking a step back and saying, okay, what is it that I'm doing and what is the impact and the skills that I'm obtaining here that I can set forth to be successful in the role that I'm working in.
Excellent. Nadine, same question.
Yeah, I love that story too. You have such great stories. I'm actually going to piggyback and talk more in terms of, because, my background, I've worked in, workforce development programs. And the challenge that a lot of young people have is this doesn't work for me. Like, I can't get through it. So I get the angry customer and I have like my own issues, and why are they getting upset with me? And then they throw their hands up in the air and then they walk out. And now you lose out on that opportunity to say, I have these transferable skills. So I think the other part of it as a young person is like, how do I develop the skill to be able to endure it, to be able to have those conversations. So I can now speak to it as a transferable skill. And, I am going to go back to, thinking about how do you build up that skill set. I recently saw on LinkedIn, because I'm on there all the time, Tuula Hansen, and she said, "Don't be furious, be curious," right? Like, it's very easy for us when we get feedback or somebody comes at us to, internalize it. But instead, if you flip it on its end and say, well, why is this person responding this way? I know I haven't done anything. What's informing that behavior, then that can also be an opportunity. And then it can translate into that waitressing job. So somebody comes at you, and now it translates into you've just graduated and you can now use that as a transferable skill. So I think, again, there does have to be that personal internal exploration and development and cultivating, so that you have the stamina, you can develop the grit and the resilience, so you can then speak to it and then use it to accelerate your career, really.
And I've been on plenty of interviews. I can't even imagine them not asking that question, right? I'm asking that question, tell me about a time when, or how about this, or transferable skills. So these types of questions, yes, we're gearing these questions these statements more towards early college students, but these things these questions will never go away in the interview. I don't know why they won't go away, but people just want to know, like, can you handle adversity? That's really what it is. Can you handle the adversity? So Nadine, I do have a question for you. How do you give a balanced response so you can be authentic in your interview, especially if the message may be negative or difficult to receive?
Yeah. So, back to that earlier point about, don't be, furious, be curious. I think it's a question of, first of all, the truth matters. If you're on an interview and, there's any inkling that you're not telling the truth, that could, put you that could basically eliminate you from consideration for a role, right? But at the same time, if you tell the truth about maybe a bad situation at work, that might put you in a negative light. So you might want to make up a story, but if that person finds out, that puts you in a difficult situation. The other thing too is that the landscape is changing, right? So you even have like folks like Ifeami, and I don't want to mispronounce her name, but Ifeomi or Ifeoma Ozuma, who actually partnered with the California governor to pass legislation to help people not have to face the consequences of an NDA, so that they can speak truth about, maybe a negative situation that might be, dangerous either to employees or to customers. So we're also in an environment where the truth really matters, but how you say it too makes a huge difference. So make sure, like, when you're thinking about, that tough situation, you're first of all removing your feelings from the facts, right? Again, don't be furious, be curious. Think about what actually happened, what could I have learned from that? Or what could have, again, been informing that behavior, why I got that outcome. And then it's easier for you to be a little more objective when you're sharing what's going on and to give more of a balanced account. And then keep in mind, just taking a step back, like pausing and thinking about, again, is this how I'm feeling, or is this actually what happened? These are important skills and critical skills as well, especially on the interview. If I know that, number one, you can tell the truth, but tell it in a way that is balanced, where you're able to talk about both sides and considerations on both sides. Like, I know I was wrong, but, or I know that this is how I felt about the situation. It was a bad situation, but here's how I contributed to it. And here's the lesson that I learned from it. That shows the interviewer that you can do that in the workplace as well, because that happens all the time. You're always looking about that win-win. And in order to do that, you have to acknowledge what happened. What are the facts? What's the truth? right? And how do we, find a compromise, right? And so speaking the truth, I think is necessary, even when it's a bad situation. I had somebody today actually who was telling me about they were a manager and they had a situation where they had to terminate someone. And typically if a manager tells me that, they had an underperformer and they had to terminate them, I'm like, well, I don't really like that, because to me, it's like, you should, as a manager, be able to help them get better, right? That's your job. In this example, she told me about how she unfortunately had to terminate the person. What I loved was that she was vulnerable and shared how she felt about the situation, but then saw the outcome was, I realized that the team morale went up, and, this is the lesson that I learned in how I could have better managed the situation so that next time, the person might be able to get to that next level. And this is how I've applied it in subsequent, underperforming employees. And I love that. And I told her that, I was like, not only did yes, it was a bad situation. And typically, I didn't tell her this, but typically that's something that would eliminate a manager from consideration. But because she was able to talk about the lesson learned, that truth now stood and had greater value. And now I can trust she's going to do the same thing and be thoughtful, So I think having that ability to, again, speak truth to power, but in such a way that you're drawing people in, right? So again, stay curious, draw people in with that curiosity. You're then able to be true to yourself, be true to the situation, and hopefully, grow.
Love it. I love it. Stay true to yourself. I love it. You can't be true to yourself. You can't be true to anybody else. I love it. So, Zahra, question for you. I know I keep using this example. Fresh college student interviewing, hey, or let's go, instead of college student, let's go early graduate. Got my first job went okay, but it really wasn't what I was expecting. My first job out of college, just it happens to people, right? Had a couple of bad experiences at that job, right? So now I'm on my second interview with another company. And they say, hey, tell me about a time you faced adversity. Tell me about some negative experiences that you had at the job, right? So when you go in that job, do you say, man, they was tripping, man, they wouldn't give me my hours, they wouldn't let me work on the stuff. Like, how do you present that to your future employer when you're doing that?
Great question. You have me on the edge of my seats with these questions. So exactly, what Nadine said, I think you have to make sure that you are being truthful to yourself and speaking your truth, but also making sure that you're not pointing fingers and putting blame, right? So in that sense, and I see this a lot in working with college students is, tell me about a time, exactly what you just said, like, what about your job? Like, why are you leaving, right? And it's really easy to be extremely honest, right? And be like, oh, they are like, they're doing this. I don't like this, X, Y, and Z. That you need to remain polished in saying, it just was not an experience that I was looking for. I'm really looking for X, and like reroute the conversation to what you're looking for in the new job that you're applying to.
Right.
And again, like, it is a small world. So absolutely, I encourage you to speak your truth. But this is where like your board of directors come in and like, are you speaking your truth in a positive, professional manner versus speaking your truth like to a friend behind closed doors? Because you really never know how small the world is and how connected people are, right? So you really never want to talk badly in a non-professional way about anybody.
So let's say, for example, I was on a team. The team was great, but the management was terrible, right? So in the management was one of the reasons why you wanted to leave from your first employer to go to a new one. And this is a very real example. This example happens all the time in corporate America. So now you're trying to go to your second employer and you tell them, like, hey, you don't tell them like I'm leaving because my manager sucks, my manager was an asshole. how would you reframe it to say, hey, it just didn't work out between me and a certain individual?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it would be different working styles. And I think to Nadine's point, saying like, I did X, Y, and Z to try to meet halfway and more than halfway, and the clashing just continued. And these are the things that I'm looking for in my next employer. So it goes back to the first point that Nadine made in terms of like your purpose and that like searching of what exactly are you looking for? Because I think a lot of candidates miss that, yes, a company's interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them, right? So you wouldn't want to just say like the perfect response and end up in the exact same situation with clashing views. So being upfront with that company saying, you know, these are my views and this is what I'm looking for. And through my research with your specific company, these are the values in X, Y, and Z that, you know, really sparked my interest in this role.
Okay. That's great. So Nadine, how would you approach it? Let's say, for example, management was great, right? But the work that I was doing wasn't what I was expecting, right? I was expecting to do X, Y, and Z type work, but I got ABC type work, right? So how do you explain that situation to in your interview process?
Yes. First of all, I feel like Zahra's answer was complete. The only thing that I'm going to add is, because, you know, that's definitely another spin on it, right? So it could be the manager, it could be the work itself. You know, if it is the work, you know, focus on, you know, here's what I was hoping to learn. And I saw an opportunity to continue to stretch myself. That's what inspired me to apply to this job. And here are the lessons that, you know, I hope to bring from where I came from and what I'm going to add value, you know, through these lessons. But whatever you say, keep it short. Do not use like one of my long-winded, I tend to be very long-winded, but like the most important thing is whatever you say, just be thoughtful about it. There's this really great resource that is called, it's called Educative. They actually have a course. It's called Grokking the Behavioral Interview. And grok is actually defined as understand something intuitively or by empathy, and, you know, or empathize or communicate sympathetically and establishing a rapport, right? So the interview is a very short period of time. You typically don't have more than a couple of minutes per question to get your point across, establish that rapport, and wait for the next question. So keep it short, right? Whatever it is, be thoughtful about it. And what I love about this course that I just shared is that a lot of the questions that you're going to find, especially in a behavioral interview, you can actually just do your homework, right? You'll have those answers ready. Have your resume in front of you. Have the responses on that resume or in a piece of paper next to it. You know, have your notebook in front of you. But it's really important, you know, whatever your response is, to just keep it concise, because especially if it's a bad situation, you don't want to share more details that will raise more questions and that might, you know, have you in a rabbit hole that you can't get out of, right?
Right. Okay. So, Zahra, question for you. The STAR method. What is the STAR method?
Wow. I was literally going to unmute myself and be like, this is a great way to organize your thoughts. So you mentioned, right? Like, I think all of us somehow, I would be lying to you all to say I'm just this interviewing expert. You still get the butterflies when you interview, right? And you can prepare as much as you want. You don't know what they're going to ask you, but the best way, especially if you're like me and I love to ramble and I love to talk, if you haven't noticed already, is it's a great way to organize your thoughts, right? So it stands for STAR. S is you're going to define the situation. So what was the situation? T is the task. What was the task at hand? And then A is the action. So what steps did you take to resolve this issue or, fix the problem? And then the R is what people always, always, always forget, but it is the most important, and that is the result. So if you think about storytelling, right? There's an art to storytelling. We've all been there when someone's telling you a really long story or a really short story, but you want it to be just right, right? So when you're giving your story, you need to make sure that you give them the result. Like what happened? What was the ending? And that is a really great way to highlight metrics, percentages, things that are really showcasing to the person that's hiring you, right? Like, this is why you should hire me. So to Nadine's point of like having your resume or a notepad next to you, I see this more often in a virtual setting as someone's doing this and they're reading right from their notebooks. I have a notebook next to me, or someone is nervous and they're doing their, pitch of who they are. Like, tell me about yourself. And it's, hello, my name is Zahra Barikbin. And like, you could see their eyes moving through the screen. So you really don't want to have that security blanket, and more along the line of just glancing to see a number versus just reading off of the screen. So STAR method, read about it, organize your responses. A tip that I like to do is just having similar to like the values and the mission, and looking at the job description. I like to look over my resume and organize 6 key examples, one being like a teamwork building, one being maybe like a failure or a negative question that they might ask me. And I'm ready to be able to phrase it and like have my examples preset. So I know, okay, this is the response that I'm going to give using the STAR method.
Excellent. So yeah, we talk about these theories, especially with the STAR method, all the time, but we never just really formalize it and just make it formal. We never make it say, hey, this is what this means. People usually just do it all the time, so that and never just like say, hey, this is what this method is, right? So Nadine, we've had a great conversation. We've talked about interviewing effectively. I'm really hoping that someone gets something out of it. I know I did. I hope the audience learns something as well too. What are 3 takeaways that somebody can take from this conversation that we're having right now?
Yeah. So 3, huh?
Just 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, something.
So, I talked about this a little bit, earlier, center yourself, put yourself in the right frame of mind, right? So, again, I know it probably sounds cheesy when you're young. It's like, why do I have to do this? But mindfulness, meditation, some people might pray, but you need to heal. You need to make sure that those hurts are kind of dealt with. It's not going to be perfect, but work on yourself. If it means therapy, mental health awareness day. I think there was a day recently. It's a growing issue, especially after the pandemic. It's okay to reach out for help. But I do find a lot of folks, you can see the hurt in the interview, and I want to reach out and tell them this. And especially as a young person, if you're in school, you have a lot of responsibilities. Even if you don't, you could just feel lonely. Like, make sure you work on yourself. And then also understand, like, this is a conversation between you and the employer. You want to present yourself in the best way because you certainly want them to want you, but they should want you too, right? So, look for those red flags. If the interviewer is late, you don't have to be rude about it. You don't have to be dismissive about it. Again, operate from a position of grace, but take note of it and, make your decision accordingly. If they're not respectful of your time, if they take a little too long to get back to you, if they're not communicating with you, it's okay to say, you know what, this might not be the right environment for me because maybe they don't value their employees the way that they should. And like I said, I recommended grokking the behavioral interview. I think there are a lot of really great resources that have already been shared. I hope y'all were able to see that. My good friend, Brittany McKeldin, who's a career coach and people management professional, actually put me onto that. One other thing is, do your homework, right? Know your values, know your deal breakers, know your purpose. How does the company align with that? And so you should be assessing that during the interview as well. Again, you're, presenting yourself the best that you can. The company too is also in an interview as well. Before you get there, go on their company website, look at their values, go on websites like Dipper. So it's www.rdipper.com. Also www.teamblind.com. Two really great websites where people leave anonymous reviews about companies. So you can see what the real deal is, right? You can find out information about salary. You can find out information about, the culture and the work environment to see if it's a type of company you want to be a part of. But, it could be your dream company. If they're not going to take care of you in a meaningful way, it's probably not going to be the best place for you to go. So, take it from some folks who've been kind enough to share so you can learn. Those are my takeaways and some resources to go with it.
Excellent. I put them in the chat as well. So if anyone wants to take these resources and use them to their advantage, by all means, please do so. And Zahra, do you have any takeaways that the audience should leave her?
Yeah, I echo everything Nadine said for sure.
Right.
And then my takeaways in addition to what Nadine shared would be, you're not alone, right? So a lot of us are uncomfortable. We're navigating different things, juggling different things. The pandemic isn't easy. And it doesn't seem like there's a light at the end of that road. And trust me, I've been there, but get your board of directors, get your mentors, get people to want to invest in you. So my one would be, you're not alone, get your board of directors. 2, use that STAR method, practice the STAR method and practice record yourself. The first mock interview I've ever done, my sophomore year of college, I didn't realize I was twirling a pen the entire interview. And I had no idea I was doing it because my nerves got the best of me. And I was so nervous, and it took watching the replay and listening to my voice on video so bad to recognize that, right? And I'm animated. I use my hands when I speak, and that's just part of who I am. I will still do that in an interview because I want you to also hire me for me, right? So continue to be your authentic self, and learn and use your board of directors to kind of look at the things that you can work on, because we all have things that we can work on. And then my last thing is network, right? So network and set goals for yourself. If you are introverted, that's okay, right? Networking isn't just for extroverted people. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't need to be small talk, right? Go to an event, like start off by going to an event with a friend, right? And then the next time go to an event with another friend, and then be like, okay, friend, I'm going to walk in with you, but I'm going to leave you and like try to break away and grow my own wings. And then the next time around, you can go to events by yourself, right? So it's almost taking those baby steps to get you outside of your comfort zone. But what I live by is being bold and taking ownership of your career and taking ownership of where you want to be, right? Because at the end of the day, people are there to help you. But if you're not raising your hand and asking for help, right? People aren't going to know, and they're not going to just be like, hey, let me just, add another thing to my to-do list, right? So it's okay to ask for help. And just connect with us. Nadine, I don't want to speak for you, but feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share tips and tricks there, and recognize we may sound like experts in this matter, but we definitely did not start there.
Absolutely. So yeah, you can just let Nadine you first. Where can the people find you on the socials, on LinkedIn, Facebook, company websites that they can go to look you up?
Yeah, Zahra, that was so smooth. You went right in there. You could have spoken for me. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Nadine A. Mullings. One thing that I will add to, as fellow introverts, I love this.
Love it.
Introverts Unite Separately.
Yes.
A really great book, a great book for introverted folks out there is Quiet by Susan Cain. I love her story. She's done so many interviews, but most importantly, she's a severe introvert that, released this bestseller and then was required to do all this networking. So I think just reading that book, I think is great. And listening to some of her interviews are great. But yes, you can definitely reach me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/IN/Nadine A. Mullings.
Zahra, yourself, where can the people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, and then it's just Zahra-Barikbin. So search my name.
And you can find me on Twitter at Ghostface Sigma. You can find me on LinkedIn at Brandon Gordon. You'll see my handsome face. You can find in Living Corporate on the web, livingcorporate.tv, Twitter at livingcorp_pod, LinkedIn at Living Corporate, and Instagram at Living Corporate. All the names that we can find the Living Corporate podcast will be on the comment section. And with that being said, catch us next Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. We have a great show in store for you. Next Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And with that being said, we'll see you guys later. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.